Welcome to Behind the Book, a series on the channel where historical fiction authors share the inspiration, research, and stories behind their novels. Today I'm joined by historical fiction author Kerry Chaput to talk about her novel, The Secret Courtesan. Some of the most compelling historical fiction begins with a small detail from the past, something easily overlooked but impossible to forget once discovered. And in this conversation, Kerry shares the historical spark behind her story, the journey of her protagonist, and the moments of research that stayed with her long after the writing was done. Let's step behind the book. What nugget of history inspired the story?
Well, I knew that I wanted to write a story set in the Renaissance. I have a trilogy, as you know, that was set, kind of in that time. And I wanted to go back and write something in that time. And so I really started looking at female artists because I was really interested in that. And I found out that I really couldn't find any female sculptors from the Renaissance. I looked and I looked and I looked and I couldn't find any large scale sculptors. You found definitely some painters and some other artists. I found a sculptor that worked on like walnuts and fruit pits, like on small, because that was what she could find to craft. And then I started thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. I know they were there. Why don't we know about them? So I started researching more about the limits on women of the time, and they were definitely not allowed to be sculptors because, moving those big rocks around, they'd get big muscles that would be unsightly, and they would get dust in their hair. And so there are all these societal limitations, plus women were not allowed to take classes or, see nude models or do anything, do apprenticeships. So there's so many limitations on preventing women from being artists of any kind, but especially limiting them from being sculptors. And what I know of women's history is that I know that they were there. They were just getting their work misattributed or stolen or working in secret. And I wanted to tell that story.
What is the story's premise?
The story is about an erotic statue that gets unearthed in Venice, and it is up to a historian to determine the research, authenticate the research of that statue. And everybody thinks it's this famous male artist. It was sort of, elusive and interesting from the time. And she believes that it was not him, but his courtesan who was erased by history. And so she has to set out to prove who sculpted that erotic statue, and she gets herself in a lot of trouble and rocks a lot of boats to try to get the truth.
How might readers resonate with the protagonist?
Well, I have two protagonists, one from modern time and one from 1609. And both women are up against a power structure that limits them, what they can say, what they can do, and sets up an expectation of what is asked for them. And they have to decide if they will do what society expects them to do, or if they are going to break some rules and put themselves in trouble in order to do that. So I think that a lot of women in today's world will resonate with the idea of feeling like you have to fit into a box, or feeling that you have to live in the expectations that maybe your family or the world has set for you, and how scary and hard it can be to step out of that.
Is there a favorite line from the novel that resonates with you?
I do love one specific line, and it's near the beginning of the book where she has a theory. She only has a few days left before this letter of authentication has to be signed by her, and she has a theory about the sculptor, and no one's going to believe her, but one other researcher does. And he is very intrigued with this story, so he's pushing her to go back to the archives and look one last time. And she's like, I've got 3 days left. Let's do this. So they're off to the archives. And her undergraduate degree was in women's studies, which of course everyone, glomps onto and decides that she's not as serious because she's only majored in women's studies. They like to joke that she's an expert in wenches and witches. And so at that night, when she decides, okay, yeah, let's do this, she tells the other historian, this is your first lesson in women's studies. First up, forget everything you think you know about history. And I love that because studying women's history, just every day, I think, why don't we know about this? And why was this hidden from us? And I've always said that history is sort of one big opinion piece. And so let's get some other opinions in there of different viewpoints of women and minorities and different perspectives than what we have ever been taught. And the picture is much bigger and much richer than what we've been shown.
Was there a piece of historical research that has stayed with you since you discovered it?
Part of what brought me to this story was discovering courtesans years ago, reading about Italian courtesans and how they had a lot of freedom compared to other women of the time, especially women of nobility. They had the ability to get an education. They were able to read. They had access to the arts. They could become artists when many women were not allowed to. They contributed quite a bit to society, especially to the arts, and had a lasting impression. And I think that that's something that gets overlooked because they were sex workers. And I found that very fascinating. And it's also stayed with me how tragic their lives were. Veronica Franco was one of the most well-known Venetian courtesans, and she did a lot she was a writer, and she produced a lot of important sort of feminist thinking, and she worked to try to prevent other women from having to go into her line of work. And she was the prized woman of Venice, and she still ended up dying young and alone and penniless. And that was the trade-off for a short life of access to things that were kept away from women for so much of the time. So I think a lot about the rules against women and the things that they weren't allowed to access, and how some women did find a way to do that, but it came with a great cost.
Thank you so much, Kerry, for sharing the story behind the Secret Courtesan. It's always fascinating to see how a single moment in history can unfold into something much larger on the page. And for those of you watching, I hope this conversation has given you a new glimpse into the layers behind historical fiction, the research, the questions, and the quiet discoveries that shape these stories. If The Secret Courtesan has sparked your curiosity, you can find it at your favorite bookstore or through your local public library. If you enjoy stepping behind the books you read, you'll find more conversations like this here on Author Notes. Until next time, happy reading.